this to the computer.
Is this image okay for both of us?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. That's good. All right. So hello, everybody. This is Talking Palettes. I'm your host, Daniel Crosier, and I'm here with the fantastic Collin and Chuck Parson. How are you cats doing?
I'm
good.
Oh, there's going to be so much talking over each other. I love it. So how's isolation?
Go for it, Dad.
For me, it's fine. I'm married to an absolutely wonderful woman. She stays out in the garden. I stay in my studio. So things are fine for me. I'm being productive and somewhat contemplative.
and I'm doing well. My wife and I and my 2-year-old son, we bought a house late last fall that needs a lot of work. So I've been doing a lot of digging, and I'm one of the outside doing a lot of landscaping, and I'm one of the lucky few that continues to have a job. So I'm working from home, and my wife's a speech therapist who has taught herself very quickly how to do teletherapy. So I think that's pretty cool. Wow. But all of this and juggling a 2-year-old, and we're getting into, as everyone, sourdoughs. We're learning how to bake, so very excited about that.
Don't juggle 2-year-olds. They won't be able to keep their sourdough down. Guys, we go pretty far back, at least it seems like 20 some odd years, at least, especially with you, Chuck. You were my first instructor from Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. And I think in a close proximity, you and I had a near-death experience. Probably within a week or so of each other. And then I think you were teaching a life drawing class. It was the first time I was able to participate in that. And then 2 years later or so, I transitioned from an illustration major into sculpting, and really had you full time, and got to experience that and set fire to my pants. That was wonderful. And then of course through you, Chuck, met Evelyn and your son here, Collin, who has like the family trademark beard. I love it.
Thank you. I was waiting for it. I was like, it's going to take him like 2 minutes to mention the beard.
Right. I love how pigment has started to escape you in that beard too. One day I'll be there. But
actually, in those days, every one of my grown children, as they merged out of high school, took a class with me, a college class.
No kidding.
And, I was in a 3-dimensional design class teaching, and one of the other students came over and said, "Who's the goofy tall guy that keeps laughing at all your jokes?" So I walked over to Collin, who had very long hair at the time, and just put my hand over his forehead and put my cheek against his, and the whole class went, "Oh my God, it's your son."
Yeah. That's fantastic.
It was fun teaching one's children as grown-ups, I'll tell you. Anyway, Rocky Mountain, we go back. You were very evocative in terms of experimenting and trying different things. And
I know.
That was the spirit of art
Cocaine
education.
was prevalent.
Yeah.
Chuck, kind of going back even further, to your origins. Can you tell us what got you, into doing sculpture and illustration and painting? Because you practice all those different disciplines.
Sure. I knew at age 8,
Mm.
very definitively, I wanted to be an artist. And my mother sent me a year and a half ago, right before she passed away, a box full of some things from my early years. And there were how to draw books.
Okay.
And I remember at age 8 discovering how to draw cast shadows from fence lines going back in perspective. I was enamored with it. Simultaneously, at age 8, I started studying classical guitar with a Hungarian classical guitarist. And so I was taught real strong fundamentals. And by the time I was 12, in the Washington, D.C. area, I played a Bach duet on the radio with my instructor. Simultaneously, 6 months later, when we moved to Florida, I encountered a professional landscape painter who I went in on a Saturday with my parents to sign up for a drawing class. And I absolutely, to this day, still love the man. He took me under his wing. He truly mentored me. But it was a dialogue between art, visual art, and music from those very early formative days. And so my training, where I went on after 4 years of study with this professional artist, being a horrible high school student, but inhaling books, reading a lot, and drawing and oil painting a lot, and playing in bands, I then went to the Kansas City Art Institute and encountered the same kind of working artist sensibility, where the artist, he or she makes things. And the people I studied with were always in Japan, in New York, in Kansas, making art. When I moved to the Detroit area for graduate school, it was the same thing, working artist. Many of the people I studied with and many of the students were exhibiting in a very, very strong way. So I was always around artists who produced, artists who thought, artists who engaged with others, artists who were active. And so when I moved out west, just to be out west, not knowing anyone, not having a job, nothing, but to see the horizon line, that was the continuation of self-teaching. And to this day, I've maintained that. So that's the kind of quick compressed version.
Wow. That's pretty compressed. I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, I've heard the long-winded version. So
that's true. I've had students tell me, you have stories that eventually get to the point. Sometimes it takes a few weeks.
Sometimes it feels like a Robert Altman film.
Yeah, thank you. Collin, your turn.
Yeah.
What was the question?
So Collin, growing up, with Chuck as your dad, and of course, Evelyn is a huge creative person too. She's a dancer. What was it like to kind of, grow up under that? Did you, always want to be an artist, or, earlier we were talking about your, education, in the theater, and doing like set designs and lighting design stuff. Was that, just always the way, or it was always something that was very prevalent, or did it, did you just have other influences outside of your?
Yeah, I would say, as a kid, grew up either in a theater watching my parents, either my mom dance or their friends doing a performance piece, or original small play, or whatever, random naked people running around in a small theater, or to many different art exhibits. And so that was just the normal to me. It was nothing, I thought that's what everyone did, was go to art shows and hang out with interesting arty type of people. But then I would say when I got into high school, I got into a technical theater and a little acting, just kind of the drama program. Just, those are the people that, we understood. I also, you know, was a skateboarder and hung out with my friends and got into trouble, and you know, so I never really
Spent a lot of time in emergency rooms. Jeez.
The home away from home.
but I never really, I would say, never took any visual arts classes really in high school, and it wasn't until college where I went to get my undergrad in theater design. But that was where I realized I was like trying not to be my parents, because I think especially my dad, you know, the definition of an artist to me was someone, he just said, a maker, a producer, someone who constantly created work. And that just seemed like a lot of work to me. And so, and I was trying to find my own path, but it was funny. I remember it took me like 2 years into the BFA theater design program to realize, wait, I'm getting a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I'm an artist, I guess. I'm a designer. And then very quickly, you know, I realized I love theater design, and the collaboration, but you know, you have those ideas, and then a director is like, great, but we're actually going to go this way. And it started feeling like a job to me. And then I see my dad with the freedom and just knowing artists. And so that's where I started really going into the fine arts world. And obviously my dad's super supportive and always helped me out. And quickly upon, you know, graduating, I would say I kind of almost dropped the theater world away from me and just focused completely on the fine arts world. And yeah, so it's special having a parent who's an artist and parents who are artists, and then my sister who's an actress, and my brother who's a musician and an artist, and then almost all of us are educators as well. So I think we all have that in common. I actually joked, you know, there was a time when all of us were working at different governments, entities, either teaching art or education in different ways. And then my mom was unemployed in the private sector. So like, yeah, no, I feel like I'm glad I have that support, but my parents never forced it on me. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. Dan, there was an interesting passage that occurred early in Collin's fine arts career. He had applied to several competitions, and one of them was for a temporary installation, a series of 10 installation artists at the Loveland Art Museum.
Nice.
Now, he had helped me for years installing works all across America, as my other kids also had, but Collin had become very essential to me in physically putting things up. I went up to help him at the Loveland Museum for his first, I would say, very public major installation. And he was chatting with the executive director and the curator. And so I'm over there putting nuts and bolts together for him. And I'll walk over to now chat as I normally would as the artist. And Collin looks over at me and he said, "Did I say you could stop working?" But it truly was, it was hilarious, but it also was a passage of his asserting, but also me accepting what I learned to do as a teacher. And that's, you want that next generation to find their place, but it's got to be their place at their time.
Right.
His brother was given an upright string bass when he was 14 years old, had no interest in it. At age 18, he was totally enamored with it. So part of it's timing in the arts, as well as that background, that support.
Yeah, most definitely. I remember, some days, helping the two of you out. I think either during art school or shortly thereafter, because specifically with one installation over at the Arvada Center, of which Collin, you've been working there for quite some time.
13 years.
Yeah.
That's why That's why my beard's white. It's all the artists I've had to deal with over the years.
I totally understand and I sympathize. We are a tough breed to deal with. But yeah, it would seem and when I talk to you guys, you have a number of these group or family projects. Like you have some other properties, I think in southern Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, that you've been developing and working on, and it seems that while Colin's on his path, and Chuck, you've always been on your own path. It's still refreshing to see how you guys are so intertwined.
That the writings of Wendell Berry, who is a Kentucky-based farmer, who actually is a great essayist and thinker. Barack Obama gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award. He writes, Wendell Berry writes about teaching by doing. Yeah. But again, I learn from my kids. So to give you an idea, you mentioned the family projects. Even if we have a friggin' party, I am so reassured now that I don't need to, Evelyn and I don't need to orchestrate who's playing the music, who's doing what, who's calling the police to let them know. Instead, there's this whole flow within the next generation of our family. And so our property in southern Colorado was purchased at the turn of the century for me initially just to put up some of my exterior sculptures in a private way, because I was showing through the country, but it was hard to bring some of these works back if they weren't purchased and just lay them on the ground. So we eventually, as a family, designed, and you can see facets of each one of the family members' input, the design of an 1,100 square foot multi-use cabin, and it's all recycled materials. And out of that grew the idea that Colin and his wife and Devin and his wife each built in their own designed way tiny, what do you call them? What do you call yours, Colin?
Mine's a love hut.
A love hut, and Devin's is the love shack on the property, totally separate. And again, totally inventive. Our daughter and our son-in-law up in Boulder have done the same with their home. So the art, that the creativity isn't just in the studio or gallery. In this family, every friggin' thing is creative. And so when you initially were asking before we started taping this, how are we doing with being sequestered in our homes? We're highly creative as a family. And there's some interesting revelations coming out of that.
Well, I mentioned I've been doing a lot of landscaping out front, and I love landscaping because it reminds me of an art practice. I mean, it takes a while to get it to that blank slate, but as you're getting that either canvas to the blank slate, digging or whatever, you're looking at the space and you're looking at the slope and coming up with ideas and conceptualizing it, and then you put it into and then obviously something doesn't work out and you have to fix it. And then there's the physicality of just doing it that actually I love, that reminds me of art. So
it's so interesting watching, for instance, when Colin was doing this at his previous home, he had to deal with those functional, practical, pragmatic realities that sometimes are missing in the world of art today. In backing up, looking at the actual making process, you could suddenly see he turned his artist as the poet hat back on and would say, do I need a little more of this texture here? Rather than for drainage, but for aesthetic reasons.
Obviously, I learned that the hard way just recently, Dan, and had to go back.
I was just thinking about that. Just like, Yeah, until Chuck pointed out drainage, I was like, yep, drainage. You still got to figure out drainage.
I didn't do that on purpose.
It looked good, though. It looked good.
I'm glad I didn't have to do the work for you. Chuck was going to go there
I
anyway.
had a leaky basement, everybody. A leaky basement.
Oh man, oh that's fantastic. Now with the landscaping and everything, how much of that? Because I know Chuck with you, going into looking at horizon lines and doing large scale pieces, is Collin, is that something that that you take or can take, I guess, and apply it to your light installations?
Well, yeah, because I mean, a lot of my public art pieces are very architecturally based. If you think, if you look at them, more the more permanents are either on facades of buildings, undersides of bridges, or actually recreating a house that once stood. That's my most recent piece that's in the city of Lakewood. But so yeah, I would say I work very, I would say, like, especially with the public art, very architectural, where here's the idea, but then you kind of have to hand it off to the experts, the engineers, the fabricators to help figure out how to actually get that idea to fruition. Where I think my dad still loves, although he's starting to pull back on the bigger pieces and, outsource those when they need, but he still loves the physical building of his sculptures. And so yeah, I would say that's the biggest difference. But I think we approach our art probably the same. He probably does more sketches. He has a really strong foundation. I wish I definitely, that's something I don't think I told him this, but that's something I do regret, was never having him force me to learn how to draw as good as him. I wish I wish he was like, son, you're gonna sit down and you're gonna learn this. I don't want to learn it. Kind of like pianos, or like learning the piano or something, But I would say that's really the only and because I used to help him paint murals at the Museum of Nature and Science.
Yeah.
But that's just my dad being the awesome artist he is. That's just being the son and helping him. And there'll never be another Chuck Parson, but yeah, I don't know. I just kind of took that everywhere.
Well, no, that's fine.
Back to this, how Collin invents his work. It was a very interesting study, Dan, to have a democratic process in the design of our cabin, and then the adaptation from the initial plans, where even the building inspector would come out and say, excuse me, wasn't there supposed to be a small window here? And you suddenly have a bank of windows 20 feet long, floor to ceiling. I said, well, yeah, a local museum was redoing their dioramas and we came across extra glass, so we adapted. Well, there was an adaptation, but the siding of that was based on solar, on some pragmatic things. So when Collin and Devin each selected very early on a site where it's just walking distance on this art retreat we've got that's private in rural Colorado, they would spend days sitting there with a beer, walking around, looking at various places. And then when they selected the site, how did they want to orient the front of their tiny little 130 square foot cabins as such? I've seen Collin do the same with his sculpture. The Addenbrook, is that what it is, Collin?
Yeah.
Collin called me a couple times and just on the phone, and he was over there in different conditions in the spring and then in the winter, looking at the snow, saying, Dad, I'm looking at this, I'm looking at, and he was an artist looking at the site. And that is something that I think can't be taught, but intuitively, if it's there, it can be cultivated. And Collin has been very good about that in his work.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, that killed Dan. Sorry, Dan.
Oh no, that's fine. With that, I mean, it's pretty well established that there's a lot of synchronicity, between the two of you. But where is it that you guys really, diverge?
Collin.
Oh man, I was going to make fun of you a little bit.
That's okay, because
I want to throw that one out and then segue.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think my dad he mentions, there are a lot of different roles as an artist. He is definitely a poet and can be quite sensitive at times. And that's a compliment. And that's also, it could be a challenge, I mean, maybe get a little more of my mom and just kind of, you try to make it poetic to a point, but at some point you just have to move on, I guess. And so
Sure.
I would say that's one difference just conceptually is he really, I mean, he not only looks at the site, but then will somehow link it to an actual poet or a quote to an actual, then relate it to an art history reference to, then he'll relate that to something else, a musical note, if that makes sense. So he tries to link it all together.
No,
and
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's very heady and very in many ways. And then I would say process wise, he sketches a lot. Sketch, and is constantly creating. So during this quarantine, he's actually sent a sketch to all of us kids every day. So I get a sketch a day in the mail. He literally, it's a postcard of, and he's like telling me he's running out of stuff to look at the front porch, but it's a pretty cool thing to get.
Yeah.
An artist like that. And then go for it, Dad.
Well, in that regard, being forced by the conditions to, instead of it being a problem, it was like when I had my heart attack 10 years ago and I wasn't allowed to go down to our art retreat. And when I wasn't allowed to lift anything heavier than 7 pounds. And I'm going, well, that sucks, because I was making monumental sculpture. Little by little, I sat down and started drawing a place that I thought I knew from owning it for 10 years. Yeah. And for the next year and a half, I did almost exclusively drawings looking 360 degrees, side observation. And what had been a problem, I can't lift anything, I can't make anything large, became a challenge, and suddenly became a gift that I rediscovered the drawing. So the drawings I'm sending my children, grown children, on the little postcards, I've been doing things like that for years, sending to a small, close group of friends and family. But it has forced me to move closer and closer and closer to what is in my immediate area. And I'm making great discoveries. And that's the poetic side of things that I think the older I've gotten, the more optimistic I've become. And that's due to my wife's influence, I think, as much as anything. But the idea of, I look at every problem eventually, not right at the moment, but eventually as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And that gives me a little bit more length of space and depth that Collin's age, where he is in his career and where his work is, he has to go ahead and bring closure.
Yeah.
To some of the public things at times. And I love the way he develops options and opportunities, but then says, this is due on Friday, and you can see him bringing it in where I'm going, it's like one of my stories.
It trails off while he's hyper-focusing.
Technically, Collin finds great support and great manipulative capability in using the technology of today, meaning computers, some of the high-tech cutting machines, etc. And to me, if I need something like that, I will get his assistance in accessing that. But most of the time, I guess you would say old school, but I love the idea of physically drawing and rendering things, if it's for sculptural reasons, but then the manipulative stage of cutting something with a torch, welding it, and it's 2 stories tall, laying on its side in your studio, and you're up on your studio roof looking at it as if it will be standing up on edge. And I realized, no, that's not right. And I like taking it apart. In other words, if I was a chef, I wouldn't want to use recipes. I just want to invent constantly and adapt by tasting. Collin learns to write his recipes in a very creative way. And that's one of the biggest definitive differences, I think, in my generation working today as an artist and his generation working today as an artist. Not better or worse, but just a different sense of how you make your own mark. Yeah. I still find more satisfaction in getting a handwritten note from someone than an email saying exactly the same thing from someone. Sure. I like that mark.
I totally understand. From what I get of this is in event planning, Chuck, you're seeking options, and Collin, you're seeking solutions. One tends to narrow down, and one tends to expand. I ran into this, which is, I think the two of you together complement each other. But I ran into this with one of my previous partners for Dink. It was crunch time. We needed solutions. Oh, well, kept expanding and expanding ideas that kept unfolding into other ideas. It's like, no, that means lots more work. We've got 10 minutes. We need a solution, So that was always interesting, kind of, that creates that in real time bebop, But one thing I was thinking about too is, you're both influenced by music. Collin, I don't know, if you actually, play a lot of music. I know, Chuck, you do. But in isolation, while you're working on projects and stuff, what's playing through, the iPod or the iPhone or the record player?
Oh, man. Yeah, so no, when I graduated college, my parents, instead of giving me a
Porsche,
a car or a trip to Europe, or even just here's $1,000, they gave me this like beat up used thrift store drum set.
Oh, cool.
And I never showed interest in drums, and it became very apparent that the family band needed a drummer. So my dad plays bass and my brother plays guitar, and they needed a drummer. So but it was fun because I had the drum set at my dad's studio, and whenever my brother came to visit from college, we always just went out and just jammed, and
cool.
It gave me the confidence to kind of just bang on drums. I wouldn't say I'm a drummer. I could keep a beat. That's about, but one of my first.
Your first gig with us at where was it in Pueblo?
The Ramada Inn.
Yeah, the Ramada Inn.
Wow.
And Collin hid in the corner with the drums. To give you an idea, we would, in the studio here in Lakewood, always have drums set up, the bass, some microphones, so that at any given time, the family could spontaneously go out there. My daughter's in-laws came to visit from Wisconsin, and she and Adam had just gotten engaged, and we're having a barbecue, and it was one of those opportunities, like you say. And well, let's go out in the studio, make a little music. And Adam's father told me later, all I could think of was, who the hell are these people? Because suddenly Celia's up, Colin's sister, singing, and then my wife is up there with Celia's new sister-in-laws doing choreography and backup singing, and Colin's over there playing the drums, and his hands are cramping. I mean, it was great.
Tell them about the bar real quick.
Oh, is it a bar gig?
No, we have a storage area in a small southern town near where our art retreat is, in southern Colorado. We found out for what people are paying for rent for 1 year, a small studio here in Denver, we bought the former VFW hall with the adjacent bar, in which, other than taking, what was it, Colin, the electric bingo scorecard, they left they left tables, they left everything. Booze and all they left. Yeah. And so this is a tiny, tiny bar that's been a VFW bar for the last 80 years, and it holds 34 people with 17 bar stools. So we built a 4-foot by 4-foot stage, and the family keeps equipment set up in there, even though this is all for storage of artwork, and that's what the vast majority of this is. And so at any given time, if the local museum has an opening down there, or if there's just some family function, Colin, when he proposed marriage to his fiance, we had a big party in there. When Devin turned 30, we had a party, and everyone makes music. You absolutely, and I have a 10-minute timer, and we've got a spotlight, and it may be a jam, it may be solo, but the whole idea that the next generation, their children, are seeing, oh, this is part of life. This is the weaving of music, of art, of getting up and telling dirty jokes. I mean, whatever. It is really fun.
Yeah, it becomes kind of a tapestry.
Well, yeah, and Colin came up with the idea with his brother. We don't have a bartender there. What we do is you select a time, say from 7 to 7:30, and you and your partner are the bartenders, and you only serve the one drink you want to. So, and it has to be thematic. So we had, for instance, one couple, he wore a bathrobe, she wore a bowling shirt, and of course they served nothing but White Russians, the Big Lebowski.
Nice.
In the half an hour, Colin and his fiance are wearing grass skirts and coconut shell bosoms, and they are serving Mai Tais, and meanwhile, music is playing. That is the fabric that I feel very fortunate that our family and the extended friends that are just like family understand, exist, to make life full and rich.
Well, and I think it's passing on to I have a 2.5-year-old son, and he loves music. I'm not going to force it, but he loves music. And when I say music, it's not, I don't know even what child musicians play, but no, he's really into Willie Nelson. And he says, I either want happy Willie Nelson or sad Willie Nelson. Sad Willie Nelson's Redheaded Stranger. Happy Willie Nelson is Troublemaker. I mean, and then he's gotten really into John Prine, because after he passed away, I went through my records, and I was like, oh, I have a John Prine record that I haven't listened to in a long time. Yeah. And he loves it so much that he's now able to he knows how to turn on the record player and flip an album. It is so cool.
That's
so
great.
I'm over there with my beer, like, hey, go put on an album. And he goes over there and.
I was fortunate to have married into my wife's family, who are very musical, even though my mother was a professional pipe organist. That's different. In my wife's family, Colin's mother, they're folk music people. And the last reunion we had in Viper, Kentucky, outside of Hazard, I looked around the room and took inventory of who had albums out, and there were over 55 albums that had been produced in the family. And one of them was from a very renowned folk singer. So the sense of music, and when you say, what music are you listening to? I've actually shifted during this sequestered time because my record player, hear that term? Mm-hmm. I've got probably 1,000 albums in my studio, and the amp burned out on my record player. So I've got just this crummy little record player, and every 2.5 minutes with my 45s, I can make a change. So I've shifted back to classical music a whole lot, finding a whole lot of substance in that. And again, because it's actually kind of a reflective time rather than an escapist time.
Nice. Collin, we need to see some proof of you in a coconut bra.
I burned those. I burned them.
You burned them. Oh, okay.
Was that a feminist statement? That's from my era.
Oh man. So Collin, with you've got your 2-year-old really into music and everything. And when you're doing that, like these family jams, do you ever, like as a family, create art in such a way, like live painting, live drawing, anything of that nature, live landscaping?
Wow, that's a good question. I'm trying to think as a family. I would say the closest we do is what my dad was speaking of, is our parties, our family parties, where it's everything from music to performance based to a lot of dancing. We have a lot of square dancing and contra dancing, believe it or not, in our family. We're just dorks, we're just those dorks of the world. But hey, you wear bunny costumes around. We square dance.
Right. But see, I put out photographic proof that I do that. So it's already out there, and anybody who wants to hold it over me.
Actually, here's a good example. A typical family party not only incorporates the dancing and music we spoke of, but obviously a lot of food. But then one of our cousins is a street performer, a circus performer, and he always does. If you like, I would say you reserve him very quickly when you have like a family wedding. So you make sure he's on your schedule and you have a performance by him. And then I remember on my graduation, my dad painted this huge banner that just said congratulations. And then there's Eric and Joe with Moto Man Project hooking up, putting a propane tank on the back of my, and having a flamethrower attached to me. And my question was, is this safe? And they just kind of looked and said, point it, shoot it. Yeah.
This was stretched between 2 trees, 20 feet off the ground.
And so we burned this sign that says congratulations. I don't understand the metaphor behind that, or it was cathartic. It was
move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully you didn't burn the tree down.
They're like, here's your sign. Here's your sign. Burn it down. Here's your shitty drum set. Learn how to play. Here's
on to the next phase of your life.
Well, even the idea of with Collin's childhood and now your children's childhood, things like Halloween really become inventive. We did a family get together up in an old lodge, very cheap, up in South Dakota 2 years ago. Our whole family, that included Collin's in-laws. We probably had, 25 family members. We got iced in. We literally couldn't walk out on the front sidewalk of this remote lodge. Yeah. And we ended up inventing games. like the indoor ice Olympics. And you had to have a race, for instance, with two kids of the same age or two adults of the same age doing things like pushing rolls of toilet paper across the floor of the kitchen. And then you would have to be able to jump over so many chairs. I mean, it was a rental. But the idea that, oh yeah, and then you had to cut cheese wearing heavy winter gloves and then eat the cheese on crackers. Yeah. But the whole idea was, okay, we're stuck in the house, but we aren't stuck.
Right.
Was that art? No, but every one of the grandkids are doing drawings like, you know, any kid that age, but you can see them at the same time dancing. Since Colin's staring at me on this other one, when his son is listening to music, if it's live music, when there is what's formerly in music called a retard at the very end, dum da dum da dum da dum da dum da dum, and before you hit that final note, Charlie at age 2.5, his hands are held pensively and he's shaking, dum, and then he runs across the yard. That to me is a sign of you make your world.
Right.
You do not wait to have it given to you just on the screen we're looking at. And so all the grandkids are very inventive and creative, as our children were. Our 3 kids were raised either in their mom's square dance store, where they had their own little area in the back that they did inventive things with tape, with boxes, whatever, or they would be in my studio, which in Northwest Denver at that time was 6,000 square feet. And they would set up putt-putt golf courses with leftover found materials. I'm a strong believer, let that younger generation go. And somehow or other, at college age, if you really think you still want to be an artist, you have to reassess that freedom.
Yeah.
I call it the sandbox, that freedom of not being too logical about it.
Yeah. Hopefully in that sandbox, you don't find a turd.
Leave it to you.
All I can do is body humor. Sorry. So, you know, we've been talking about, you know, performance and stuff. When you're thinking about art and you're producing art in your studio, do you also equate that to performance?
I'll let you, Dad, you go.
The process of making art?
The definition of studio is more expansive than a quiet enclosed place, because yes, I think there's a certain performance aspect even without an audience, if you're aware of the actual act of it. I currently, for the last year and a half, have had a studio at Redline following Colin's footsteps, where he had a studio for 2 years there. And at times I'm very aware, as I'm doing mostly drawing and a few sets, components for performance art, that tours will come in, people will come in, and I don't have to, but I enjoy doing in a teaching mannerism, a 2-minute, 10-minute, or 20-minute introduction of what I'm doing, which is a little bit performance.
Yeah.
When I did murals at the Museum of Nature and Science, off and on for 25 years, it was similar at times when I was out in the public hallways for some of the temporary murals. It was very similar to being a sign painter, which was my bread and butter for many years, out on the street, or a pictorial, boy, that dates me, pictorial billboard painter up on, 30 feet in the air on a 55-foot wide panel. You're aware people are watching. It's like when you're playing music in your living room by yourself, you're not You're into the music, hopefully, but you're not worried about an audience. When you're professionally playing, you're aware, I need a little bit of body language to go with this. That's how I approach teaching. I approached teaching as a portion of performance art.
Yeah.
Learning from reading the crowd, figuring out, do you turn the volume up? Do you slow the tempo down? What do you do? In the studio, I guess what I love most is not being visible, just being one with the work. And at times it's very, it's just discipline. You have to go in, do the work, and then it's almost like a foreplay. It gets you excited about where you were in the work, and you're pulled into it. There are other times that it's truly inspirational. And at those points, I'm not aware of any performance aspect whatsoever. I'm just aware of everything in that room, everything under my hand, but I'm suspended. I don't know if it's 1968 and I'm in Cincinnati, or if it's 2020 and this is a commissioned piece. All of that's out the window. I'm just enthralled with the holistic blend of everything. That was a long, meandering answer. Your turn, Collin.
I think studios are meant to be more private and more experimental and more of the failure labs that they are.
That's well said.
And then, but there are those moments you want it to be performance, or those, my dad says, aha moments. My most recently, I was in my studio, this was a while ago, and working on a whole new series, and I just wasn't, it was one of those things where I felt like I was on to something. I seemed excited about it, but I called up my dad saying, hey, come over. I need to show you something, and you need to tell me if you like it or don't. Like if I should burn it and don't show it to anyone, or, and he came over, and luckily, I think he was preparing himself on the drive over to like break the news to me that this is shit. But he wouldn't say shit, but but luckily, I think he was like, all he said was, yes, keep going, kind of like he saw what I was hopefully seeing. And so that was kind of, I guess, I wouldn't want people to see those moments personally.
Yeah.
And then once you get it out, because as a visual artist, you already put it out there. I don't think the public, normal people understand how much you're putting out as an artist. When you have an exhibit or you have your work out there, there's a person behind that. As I have to remember that as a curator, I have to tell, unfortunately, a lot of artists, no, or not yet is kind of what I always tell them. Not yet. That's just not a fit right now. Maybe in the future, but they're putting themselves out there, and that could be it's a scary thing as an artist. I don't think people realize that, how scary it is to put yourself out there, to be judged, especially in this Instagram world where you can be judged by a heart or a comment so quickly.
Right.
Dan, years ago, I saw an interesting anomaly. Having the opportunity as a sign man and designer, I did a lot of work for the rock and roll concert promoter. And so I got backstage at a lot of concerts. And I was at a Red Rocks concert in which, when you're off to the side of the stage, there's no curtain. It's just light. It's just light and dark. So I was standing 2 feet behind the organist for B.B. King. And B.B. King was performing very publicly. This organist was upstage right. And big man. And he was B.B. King's age. All I know is B.B. King's talking to the crowd. He's singing, he's playing, and I'm looking at his back, the backs of everybody except for the drummer and this organist. And then B.B. King turns around and he's doing those wonderful simplified riffs on the guitar, a call and response to the organist. And he starts a shuffle over with his back to the Red Rocks audience. And I'm 3 feet behind this organist looking right over his shoulder. And the two of them were not performing. They were engaging with each other in musically a call and response. And B.B. King walked right up to him. And I'm sitting there and I felt like I was peeping through, a keyhole in a door or something. I mean, it was that almost intimate. And then B.B. King started nodding and his head was bobbing and he turned around and walked back and he was a performer again. It is interesting, that creative act.
Yeah.
How that kind of thing can be contrived, and other times how it really is real. And as Collin says, some people just don't get it, that you walk into a studio, and to me, it's a chapel. To me, it's a sacred place. Even if you're grinding metal and you've got profanity. When I moved out of one studio, I found my claw hammer stuck 12 feet up in the brick wall. I'd had a bad day, but there's residue that, Collin?
My favorite part of my job as a curator is going to artist studios. I love it.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Well, and that's one of your strengths as a curator, Collin. One of your, I think, most pronounced strengths is you are curious about going into artist studios and excavating what is out there rather than waiting on your throne for artists to come, genuflect, and kiss your ring, which seriously is how a lot of curators approach their
When
job.
I visited Dan, I loved his studio because it was exactly what I was expecting, by the way. That's a compliment. Just like it makes sense. It just fit Dan and his personality. But I sometimes I'm super inappropriate, but sometimes I just start rummaging through stuff, just like going.
My space is one of those where you have to kind of rummage through. It's like, okay, where's the dead bodies? I can smell it.
Well, Dan, when I was initially interviewed at the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design in 1986 by the president of the school, I was at the time teaching at the University of Denver, and one of the instructors at RIMCAD said, here's a guy that Steve Steele, the president of Rocky Mountain College of Art, you ought to look at. So Steve was the president of the school, and I was a person applying for the job for the first 2 minutes. And then I pulled my portfolio out. Steve started talking about his work, and we were just two artists talking the way Collin's talking about, from an artistic curatorial, but also creative studio manner. Collin walks in and he engages. Yeah. He again doesn't float in wearing black robes and I'm the curator. You can tell I'm a little down on curators at times.
Well, I'm talking about that experience of failures in the studio, and also the studio being kind of that sacred place. I think of it in terms of it's a time machine. Everything that's happening outside of the world is on a different timeline than what's happening in mine, and like it being a safe space. I think of it in terms of like the failures are exciting, and it's like how do I use those and make that into a strength? How do I whip that around? You've seen my line work, when I'm doing illustrations these days, and the response from the public, clearly they don't understand, but they're engaging. Like, hey, you got to. It looks like, for their perspective, you can't mess up. Otherwise, you've blown that. And I'm like, every line is a fuck up. I just choose to leave it. and move on to the next thing and the next thing. And you know, by that, you know, suddenly I've got this composition, you know, and to me, it is very musical. So, you know, as also, you know, putting on more of the education hat, how do you, and, you know, Chuck, you as a teacher, and Collin, you as a curator, because you're, you know, I would suspect that as a curator, you also got to work with these artists and work with, you know, sometimes, you know, as a psychologist and motivator, and, you know, to kind of help the creative process along. But how do you, you know, prepare them with, you know, coping and adjusting to failure?
Oh man.
Sorry, I guess that was a bigger question I thought it was going to be.
Well, no, I wouldn't say I ever prepare any of the artists we exhibit for failure, because then I prepare them to be flexible, and I try to get them excited. If I get a lot of times, Collin, you're excited as a curator, got me excited. After meeting you, I'm excited about the show, and gets them excited. So maybe that's one way I work as a curator. And then a lot of it's just, some art, it's hard because I work in the same spaces for the past 13 years, designing exhibits. So I really know over the years what works and what doesn't, where it works. And so it is hard sometimes telling artists, they're like, oh, we could do this and this. And like, we've done that. We've tried it 12 times. It doesn't work. Let's go this way. So, but ultimately as a curator, I would say I let artists guide me, because they know their work better than I know their work. Even if I do a studio visit and rummage through their crap, I know. When I say crap, I mean all of their stuff, not the crap of the art. They know their work best, and therefore, usually I kind of give the artist a lot of flexibility. I ask them to give me more options than I could edit at the end. But so Dan, if we're working together on this wood show, that's the conversation I'm going to have with you. Is okay, let's bring as many of these pieces, and then how can we lay it out that best fits your vision and mine? So, but it's always, you know, I ultimately have an idea for an exhibit, but I leave it instead of like this, and I start it more like this, and then it usually becomes more like that, or it just opens my mind by meeting these artists. Like, oh, you do that? I had no idea. So anyways, I don't know if I don't prepare them for failure, because hopefully I work for art. Hopefully by the time it's on our walls, it's not a failure. And I'm really good at, you know, if you light it right, you hang it right, and you put it next to you create the correct environment, you can make a lot of art look really good.
Yeah.
You can make good art look great and okay art look good. Hopefully. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Would you argue differently, Dad? I'm curious.
Oh no, what you've described is a white cube. I mean, you can make anything look really important and prestigious.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the substance of the art has to come through. And that's a combination of, in a fairly classical way, form and content. In teaching, and I've retired formally from teaching, but I've continued teaching informally on many levels. I attempt to be supportive, but critical when you get to know the person, what they can handle from your perspective. When I used to do exhibits all across the country, and quite often the local university would have me come give a talk or do a critique, I was what's known as the fast gun. You just walk in and you say what you see. You don't know if the person's capable of handling it or not, but you have to assume if you're a senior in a college or you're in a graduate program in an institution, you better know.
Right.
Or if someone asks you, what do you think about my work? And you're at a party and they keep pressing you, when is it appropriate to say, gee, whatever your day job is, you should keep it. No, I've never done that. But
well, it's never too late.
In terms of preparing people, I used to teach at several institutions. At one school, it was called Arts Industry. And one facet of that I taught at the University of Denver, at Regis University at the graduate level, was I brought in the most visionary higher education administrator I've ever worked with, Dr. Elisa Robin, who had worked a broad range of jobs through her life before she got to higher education administration. And one of them had been as a psychologist, and she talked about tools that you use to deal with rejection and anger. And we actually developed a workshop together. My children have seen me publicly say, thank you very much. I appreciate your thoughts on that. When you get reamed in the press or you are rejected from a commission or grant application that you were a finalist in, and then I have what's known as my crying spot. I'll go out back, and it really bothers me, but I've used it, and I think I've taught how to dealing with disappointment and rejection by my actions when I'm a teacher, by going back into my studio and saying, well, fine, screw you, and I'm going to do it my way anyway, and go ahead and do. I mean, many of the public pieces I've done were originally proposed for public commissions. One work that was seen for 20 years in the national press and magazines in downtown Chicago was all about Denver, and it never was received in 3 go-arounds of being a public art piece. But instead of saying, well, I'm not going to do it, I went ahead and built it anyway. And the joy in that, the creative act in the studio, is the definitive difference I make in how to deal with disappointment or saying something negative to someone. Definitively make a difference between the art and the art career. And that's one of the biggest differences I see in today's technological world. A lot of younger artists that I observe are spending so much significantly productive time on their careers that the work isn't there.
Okay.
And that's all there is to it. How do you deal with a rejection? The first time my lovely wife, Evelyn, went to New York City with me was in 1977. First time I'd gone to New York to apply for shows was in 1972. I had 53 gallery appointments, and of course was not accepted to any of them. In 1977, Evelyn went with me in mid-September and saw me walk in, at that time it was Soho, either with appointments or not with appointments, but into galleries, wait in line, have someone look at my work, quickly flip through it, be usually rudely treated, especially because I wasn't living in New York. And I would walk out to the street, I would vomit in between 2 cars. My wife had a bottle of water, I'd swirl the water, take a breath mint, walk in the next one. In the 4 days we were in New York, staying with friends, I lost 6 pounds. And Evelyn said, is it that important? It was to me at that time. That it doesn't carry anywhere near the importance anymore. But that was part of, that's what it's paying your dues. It's paying your dues, and that's part of what you, at that time, you needed to do. It's a whole different system now. Collin's much more adept at working that system and working with other artists, applying to him as a curator. Finally, in terms of
notes. He has notes. Do you see this? He has notes.
Well, no, I'm composing my thoughts. You're damn right. I love that Samuel Beckett, I'm paraphrasing, said, fail again, fail better. And I'm paraphrasing, I'm abusing it. But, what is failure? No, that's the beauty of being an artist. Mm-hmm. You don't say it all in one piece. You say it in your lifetime of work. Mm-hmm. That's how I approach it. And that way, you've got a much better possibility of success.
That's fantastic. Something that came up, and we talked about it briefly before we went on, was the idea of putting shows together and exhibitions right now. Since everybody's in isolation, how would you guys adapt a gallery show or your own personal exhibition, now for, say the world online, or how would you engage with people that are also in isolation?
I'm going to jump in here. I had I was to be involved with 5 exhibits between now and the beginning of September.
Yeah.
All of them pulled off. 2 nights ago, Collin, his brother Devin, and myself were to have opened our 5th 3-person show together. And that was a disappointment. I don't have an answer for you because I am so enthralled with the idea of seeing the artwork in person that a lot of the online does not interest me to the degree that the current generation, I'm still in the current generation too, but that people of your age seem to respond to the visuals. I still like the sound, the threat of the materials, are the seductiveness of them, the aroma of if something's been rubbed with linseed oil, or if someone is singing and it's a performance work live and they don't quite get purely on the proper pitch, that, that hurts. There's something very visceral that I seek, and I don't know if there's a way right now from my perspective. So I'm continuing to make art exactly as I was making it up to 9 weeks ago. The difference being I am now projecting a different definition of what I'm to do. And that actually is being influenced by some of the reading I'm reading, the 1804 to 1824 writings of John Audubon, the illustrator and journalist, but it's not just about birds. Yeah. I'm reading James Fenimore Cooper. I'm reading about nature, and that's why I initially came out west. So at my stage of my career, in my age, I'm realizing just making art to help me experience life brings a different kind of reward than doing the next museum show. It's not that I'm dismissive of the museum show or the new definition of what the work needs to be seen. Right now, I'm just more interested in going in solitude on the Eastern High Plains in 3 to 4 day blocks of time. And it sounds pretty romantically corny, but camping, sketching, journaling, and seeing what comes of that. And then coming back with some of the more contemporary, younger, collaborative artists I've been working with in the last year and a half, who are musicians, composers, poets, and photographers and filmmakers, and seeing, here's what I'm interested in, what are you interested in, and starting a new conversation.
Nice.
Wow.
So Collin, back to you.
You want some notes, Collin?
Yeah, can you read those over there? Just, yeah.
No, I sure hope I've spent a lot of all this time working from home, undoing all this work of exhibits that were planned.
Yeah.
At the Arvada Center or for you?
At the Arvada Center. Luckily, this hasn't affected me art-wise too much. It just fit nicely in my schedule. But I sure hope, I mentioned how you can make work even better just by putting it next to that certain piece, by lighting it, the physicality of it. So, I sure hope and cross my fingers that we'll be able to physically go view artwork in person sooner than later. I do think this has created a unique time for people, especially as you're walking around your neighborhood. I've found other sculptures I've never discovered, or just kind of strange things in people's yards, so you just kind of view things. It's made me slow down and view my immediate neighborhood. But personally and then financially, I'm someone who, one of my jobs is not only to put art together, but to put people to view art together. Mm-hmm. And so I'm in the business of putting people together, much like you, Dan. So
like Legos?
Like Legos, the heads and the feet, but riding the horse. Yeah. But no, so I think I fingers crossed that we'll get over this hump, because I think art needs to be seen in person.
Yeah.
Well, I to pick up on what Collin is saying, it has been unique to walk around the neighborhood or bicycle. And last week, I chatted across the road from a neighbor. Mm-hmm. I've lived in the same neighborhood for over 35 years now with Evelyn, our home and our studio here in Lakewood. And this is a neighbor who's lived there for years. And I just said hi, and she decided to chat from the front of her yard. We kept the social distancing. And she said, I said, I'm Chuck, and I live, and she said, oh, I know who you are. You're the artist. And she said, oh, you've got some new works out front. I really like the new one, especially nice. Well, that's not mine. Collin, that's Jody. and I said, damn you, Jody. But then she said, you've got work up at the Arvada Center outside. I said, yeah. She said, I recognize the style. I like going up there. And I've spoken with 2 or 3 other neighbors, and they know not me, but our home by the art, much like the role of, I think, good public art becomes kind of a landmark, an icon in a community. And so people know this is where there are some artworks that have stayed out front for years here. Others rotate in and rotate out in our front yard. And I'm readdressing what is my role in my immediate neighborhood, rather than, oh, I'm having my work seen virtually in Australia and in Bolivia. Well, fine. But how about 3 doors down? Yeah. How does it affect her? And so I'm back to Wendell Berry, going back to that localness where you get yourself not just grounded, but rooted. Mm-hmm. And for me, contrary to the technological dependence, I'm finding myself becoming more aware of being rooted to this area. We started the conversation with the little postcards drawing I do daily, and to find out there's not 1, but there's 2 bird nests right outside our front door. And I didn't know it. I didn't see it. I heard it when I was sketching just right off the front porch, and I could hear the fluttering of the wings. Now, I would not have noticed that. I would have been drawing more expansive,
Yeah.
deep vistas
Right.
9 weeks ago, but now it's kind of like, whoa, what is local? So I don't know where I'm going with this, but I agree with Collin. I think looking at the actual art, looking at the physical world, blended with this technological world, it's not either or, is probably the new norm.
Yeah. One last question before we start wrapping up. And for both of you, what project are you currently working on in the studio?
Collin?
Oh, I'm actually I'm actually preparing. So I have a larger studio in my Denver house, but this house has an attached garage. So I've actually spent quite a lot of time just organizing and building out a studio in the garage. So it's kind of one of those things where I'm preparing to get ready so when it's time to just make art and I have that project. I'm one of those artists too that I'm very deadline driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so unlike my dad and you, Dan, who I think you guys sketch or do something every day. My job, it's very like this. And so I
That's kind of a rhythm.
But so I'm to answer your question, I'm preparing a studio. I'm getting the studio ready, and I find it sometimes just as fulfilling, and I look forward to it because I know that there's that moment I put that tool here, but until I make that piece, I'm like, why would I put that tool there? Like it's for, so. But then I have worked on a few public art proposals recently that. I was a finalist for. I haven't heard yet, fingers crossed, but that's been that was a nice project to keep me busy for the past couple weeks as well. So
that's cool. So you're preparing your sacred space.
I am my failure lab. Yep.
Excellent.
Okay, so I'm just continuing the flow in my Lakewood studio. Things have come to a complete halt at the Red Line studio, which again I use as a clean studio. So in shifting out here, I'm working right now. Collin, it's 20 pounds per running foot for the weight of the I-beams. I'm working on a new exterior work that I proposed to Collin and the selection staff at the Arvada Center, Sculpture in the Field. And I can probably do all the fabrication here without getting too strained. It's a pretty large one. But I mean, pretty heavy I-beams right now, I have to admit. Inside, I'm working on a commission work, a sculptural exterior work. Also inside, I'm working on a new mural, and I consider it quite small. It's 8 feet by 16 feet that has no home. So I'm just doing it, which gives me a tremendous freedom. And if there's no place to put it, I'll put it down on the side of outside of our bar in Walsenburg, where I have another mural already and some outdoor sculptures. I'm working on several small sculptures, but my favorite thing right now actually is starting each day with sitting, if it's warm enough, outside, otherwise in the front door, doing these daily sketches that are intended 45 minutes to an hour for each one for either Collin, Celia, or Devin. And it just keeps rotating, and I had them numbered, and I'm at number 44 this morning. So there's 44 of them, and I think they'll be able to see more than I will, where I'm pulling things in closer, and that's been really good. I think I'm taking a cue from what Collin did with the transition because they just moved from one house to the new one. And I drove by the other day and just glanced at his new studio, and it was so fresh and clean. It's like having a room full of, if you're a painter, 10 new canvases that are all blank, stretched, gessoed, ready to go. So I think I'm probably gonna not burn, I almost said burn, clean my studio in a more aggressive way.
Well, that's fantastic. Guys, thanks so much for chatting with me today, coming on the show and everything, and kind of sharing your creative perspectives. But where can people find you and your upcoming shows when we can all congregate in the physical sense?
Yeah, you can visit my website, collinparson.com, Collin with 2 L's, or Instagram, it's just my name. And please visit my other day job at arvatacenter.org, and hopefully you'll see a physical exhibit up there sooner than later.
Nice.
And you can check my work out. We're rebuilding the website, should be the rebuilt phase intact within about 2 weeks, but charlesparsonart.com. And also my longtime gallery, May Win Fine Arts Gallery, is in transition, but you can still see some of my work and connect with her via website right now. And one other website for a collaborative thing that is still scheduled for the very beginning of October. Who knows with the current flow of events in our culture, but Leaping Man, which is a creative consortium to encourage very innovative, creative, collaborative works. I've been collaborating with a group of people, and right now you can pull up the Leaping Man website, and we'll know probably in another month if the October 3rd presentation of film, poetry, original music, sound installations, and film, original film, is all being presented in Southern Colorado at a movie theater performance space. But Leaping Man, my website, or May Win Fine Arts Gallery.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to stop the record button and just stick around.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.